Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Justin Piché. Justin Piché is a former U.S. Navy submarine officer who transitioned from key positions at Amazon and ExxonMobil to helm a successful seven-figure land investment and development enterprise. Over the last 2 years, he's overseen more than 20 subdivision projects and leads a dedicated team of 21 professionals, reflecting his strong leadership and team building abilities. As co host of the Ground Game podcast, Justin delves into the intricacies of high level land investing, providing listeners with an inside look at the operations of a seven-figure business. Committed to supporting fellow investors, he leverages his wealth of experience to mentor others on their journey to success in the real estate market. Justin, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Hey, Kendall, I'm doing great. Thanks, man, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so excited to have you back on. The first time you were on our show, you gave us a deep dive into your business, how you built it, how you run your business. And today we have you back on to talk a little bit about empowering teams and exponential growth. So before we jump into that, would love for you to share a little bit about what is your current business model? Can you share that with the
Yeah,
listeners who might not know who you are?
yeah. So we try to do a little bit of everything. I'm a big believer in monetizing whatever leads you get. I don't think the approach in this business of having one tool to solve every problem, like a hammer, everything is a nail, works very well. And it certainly has presents a ton of challenges when you're trying to scale your business to seven figures and beyond. And so we do a lot of direct to seller marketing through a couple of platforms. Obviously, we still use direct mail. I do a lot of cold calling now on the acquisition side. I now have a project manager on the team to help take down some of the subdivides and developments that we have coming across my desk because I'm continually finding that my time is the limiting factor on almost everything in this business. And when you're first starting out, it can feel that way because you're doing everything. But as you scale, it doesn't change. It's just the limited time that you do have to work in the business. It just you get more and more complex things, and you need to hire maybe better and more valuable employees, or more skilled employees is probably the better way to say that. I value all my employees a lot, but more skilled employees, or people with specific skills to take things off of your plate. So we're doing a lot of subdivides, mostly off market, some on market developments, and we have an in-house sales team as well, which is maybe not super common in the land investing space. A lot of folks outsource that directly to realtors, but I find a lot of value in supplementing MLS listings with Facebook Marketplace, Facebook ad spend, Lands of America, a buyer's list, being engaged on Facebook and conversations with people. And yeah, that's the business in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love it. So the last time we talked, I don't think you quite had 21 employees. So can you talk to us a little bit about what was that progression? What did that look like?
Yeah. Let's see. So obviously, everybody else, I started my business by myself, just hustling, if you will. I was still working full time for ExxonMobil back in 2021 when I started the business. And really, I just needed to prove to myself that it worked before feeling comfortable, maybe hiring people to do additional work. And pretty quickly, it became clear I had too many leads to deal with. I was a bottleneck. And so I needed to bring people on. And so I hired a transaction coordinator to help move things through title and communicate with buyers and sellers. I hired a sales assistant to just get my Facebook marketplace listings up and be in Facebook, replying to people, getting people added to our buyers list. And that helped. But then I still was a bottleneck on acquisitions. And so a month later, I hired an acquisitions manager. And a month after that, I hired another acquisitions agent. And then that same month, I hired a sales manager, US based, that could really take over the dispo. Because at that point in time, we had quite a few contracts relatively quickly. This is back in early 2022. And so I'd send a 10,000 piece mailer and I'd get, I don't know, like 30, 40 good leads from it and end up with 5 to 10 contracts from it. That doesn't really happen anymore with that much mail, but back then it did. And so we had just had a lot of things under contract and I needed help moving things through. I was working full time and working from, I don't know, 7:30 to midnight every night was not enough time for me to really get things rolling. And then maybe, let's see. So we hung with that team for a bit, hired onesie, twosie folks to come in to help scale the acquisitions side, the cold outreach. And then in, I want to say 2020, middle to end of 2023, we maybe had 10 people on the team. And that was probably when we met, somewhere around there, 10, 11, 12 people on the team. And launch control went down. And we were texting at the time. And I had immediately to pivot, right? Because for me, I'd scaled back mail and texting was my primary lead gen source. And so the day after launch control went down, I started cold calling. And so I got a cold calling program, moved my texting assistants over to cold calling, proved it out, got our script going, got our lead flow set up that week, and then hired six more right after that. And then we switched texting platforms, we scaled back up direct mail. And yeah, it's just been like a adding people to the acquisitions pipeline, adding another acquisitions manager to help handle the lead flow that comes from all that outbound marketing, hiring the project manager underwriter, and now we're at 21.
Yeah,
And I
the
just
rest is
had some
history.
interviews this week for another role.
I love that. I love that. So, can you talk a little bit about what does the makeup of your team look like in terms of is it a mixture of virtual assistants, stateside team members? What does that look like?
Yeah, we have, so there's four of us in the US. It's me, my sales manager, Brian, who he was at Ajay's event a couple weekends ago. My assistant, Erin, she's based in Houston as well. And then I have a marketing manager who works part-time, she's a data analyst that's stateside as well. And so those are the four stateside folks. And then the rest of the team is a mix of Latin America and the Philippines. So we have maybe three Colombian employees. One's from Argentina, one from Uruguay, and then quite a few from the Philippines.
Excellent. And where do you go to find your employees? I know that you've got a very impressive hiring funnel. We've talked about this, especially around when you were, I think when you and I met, you were
Yeah,
in the process of hiring an executive assistant.
right.
So I got a little glimpse of your hiring funnel. Can you talk a little bit about how you put together your hiring funnel, how you support that, how you nurture that, and what is your approach?
Yeah. I when you're scaling your business and you recognize like a need for additional people to help you grow in some way, I think that it's best to get those people in before you really need them. Some people push it and they like get into this crazy pain point before hiring. And there's a lot of wisdom in that because you can push yourself further and you can figure out what your pain tolerance is and then hire to bring people in. And at the beginning, when you're early, I think that's really important. I think it's important to push yourself as an entrepreneur to figure the things out, figure out what you can actually handle, push yourself beyond what that maybe breaking point you thought you had was until you bring somebody in because you really know you need them at that point. And hopefully you've worked out the processes and systems to bring them on and make them immediately productive. But when you set big goals and you're planning them out for a year, 3 years, so on and so forth, it becomes a little bit easier to see where the next hire needs to be. And so as a part of my annual planning and really financial goal planning, I figure out, hey, how much marketing are we going to send? What does that mean for how many deals we need to do? And if we're doing this many deals, how many people do we need to actually talk to sellers to try to get this many contracts per week, per month, per year signed? How many transactions is that? Do I need another transaction coordinator? How many sales is that? Do I need more assistants? Because how much can they list per day? And working your way backwards from the amount of profit you want to make through the amount of deals you need to do that, through how many people you need and which specific seats to make that happen. And then ahead of that, so you have time to train and have effective employees, hiring. And so for overseas VAs, I like to use for Latin America, I like to use Pros Marketplace, which is I'm sure people on who listening to this have probably heard it before. It used to be called remoteco.com. And this is generally for like entry level employees, like a cold caller, like a texter. You can get more skilled employees, but I find that it's hard to, as somebody who maybe doesn't have the expertise you're hiring for, like maybe let's say a financial analyst, underwriter, project manager. Okay. Like I can do those things. I do those things generally in my business now before hiring my latest hire, but I'm not like a pro at understanding which qualifications make somebody a perfect fit for this. Sure, a project manager would be great or an underwriter would be great, but there's no really specific role for a project manager, underwriter for land development. Like that's not really a common role. So it's really hard to find that person. So in the case of more skilled employees, I've actually gone through hiring services like people that specialize in identifying and qualifying candidates and maybe presenting me five, six, seven qualified candidates that I can then interview and pick the best one. And it comes with a higher fee, but it also comes with a whole lot less work for me to vet and maybe a higher confidence that person's going to be qualified for the job. And then for the Philippines, I like to use onlinejobs.ph. I think a lot of us have used that website to hire. I think it's great. There's a lot of really qualified folks in the Philippines, especially for land businesses. I don't know what it is, but like whenever we post a job on there, there's 10 applicants that have worked for some other land investor that have some experience, and that's great. And then we do a lot of word of mouth or like referrals as well. Now that I have a larger team, whenever I need to hire, let's say a couple more cold callers or cold outreach team members, we just talk to our team and we say, hey, if you have any friends, family, like people that you think would be a good fit for this role, please recommend them and we'll interview them and we'll see if we can hire them. And I think that's good for two reasons. There's also maybe a bad side to it, but the good reasons are your employee is going to stick their neck out and they know they're sticking their neck out if they're going to recommend somebody. So they're certainly not going to recommend somebody who isn't good because that looks bad on them. If that person comes into your company and doesn't perform, doesn't fit the culture, then that looks bad on them. They know that. The bad side is that then you have people that have relationships. And so if you do have a poor performing employee and you have to make the hard decision to let somebody go, it becomes more challenging because now you have these relationships and friendships like long standing, and you've just got to be really fair and really clear and really equitable when that kind of situation arises. So people understand it's business, and yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I am such a fan of hiring people that are referred by my own employees and my team because they know what works in the business. They know what type of culture it is. They know what type of person is going to be successful. And you're absolutely right. I think that there's this positive peer pressure that we see sometimes where it's if you have a team member that's bringing someone else in, they are going to feel a little bit responsible for how that person performs. And so there's a lot of, for me, I find that there's a lot of good motivation for the new team member to perform well. There's motivation for the team member that brought that new person on to help facilitate them coming onto the team. And I love that. I totally love that approach. Now, this is a really big topic, the whole idea of building a team. This is really a mainstream idea in the land space. I think that a big part of it is because the land business, especially if we're talking about straight land flips, like it's a pretty simple business model. It's not incredibly complex. So it's very easy to fall into this trap of, oh, it's super simple. I'm just going to start hiring out really quickly. But you said the magic word earlier, or magic phrase, systems and processes. So can you talk about what is the importance of having systems and processes before you bring someone into your team?
Yeah. And I'll be the first to admit, we're not perfect at this. Sometimes it's like you get to a point where you just have to build the plane in the air. But ideally,
Totally.
you can have most of it constructed. And so when you're bringing somebody new on, especially somebody that doesn't have experience in the role that you're specifically hiring for, like everybody wants to perform. Like nobody comes to, okay, maybe some people do, but in general, people don't want to be employed in a job and just like utterly fail. All right. They want to know what they're doing. They want to have a process for it. They want to understand the steps and they want to get good at it. And if you don't give somebody who you bring onto your team what they need to succeed, then you've failed and you've wasted your time, you've wasted their time, you've wasted your money on paying them. And I think that's where the systems and procedures, processes come into place, right? If you have a cold caller, for example, that you're hiring.
Imagine having a complete toolkit for success right at your fingertips. That's exactly what you get with Only Land Fan School, our premium online community. For a low monthly fee, access our treasure trove of resources, the on-market deals course, acquisitions tool suite, and Dispo Secrets library. Plus, connect with fellow flippers in our active community. Whether you're hunting for deals or closing sales, Only Land Fan School has you covered with step-by-step guidance and insider knowledge. Ready to supercharge your land flipping journey? Join Only Land Fan School at olfschool.com today.
If you don't have a good lead flow process for them to where they lead the conversation through a couple points, you have a goal of every phone call, and maybe your goal is let's qualify this lead. Here's our qualification criteria. Give them a script. That's great. I tend to, just an aside, I don't love scripts. We write them, we have them, but they're crutches. They're to be used in the case that you can't really think on your feet. But very quickly, at least for my cold callers, maybe this is some good information for people, is I want them to get off script. I want them to know what they're asking because they know what we're looking for and they know what questions to ask because they're the expert, right? They have the confidence to ask those questions. But if we didn't have that script and we just said go, and we didn't provide the training and we didn't have them shadow other cold callers, they'd be just like floundering. They wouldn't know what to do. And it'd be an unfocused couple of weeks of training, right? just as maybe a quick example. But the same thing for a transaction coordinator is probably a really good example, because in transaction coordination, there are so many different steps and things that need to be done. It's not, there's email templates. There's, when do you reply to this person? What happens in this situation? What if the title's not clear? What if there's not actually an easement? What if, I don't know, there's a million, what if there's a tax lien? What happens if it's a credit deed and a tax credit deed and not like an actual like good warranty deed? Like, what do we do in all these situations? And if you don't have some sort of playbook or SOP that helps answer these questions, your transaction coordinator is going to have no idea what to do. You're not going to know what to do. And you're just going to create a job for yourself of constantly giving them direction over and over again. And you're going to feel really overwhelmed and down on yourself because you've just created more work for yourself. And you're probably going to think to yourself, man, it'd be just easier if I did this myself.
Yeah.
And I hate to break to people, anybody who hasn't hired anybody, sometimes that's how it is the first couple of weeks of training. But the way you can limit that pain, shorten it, is by having the systems and processes outlined for them to use and train on, so that when they ask you a question, you can say, hey, what did our procedure say? Hey, what did the video that I filmed for you, the SOP where I walk through step by step, did it have that? You don't want to be sending, of course, but can you go watch that and then let me know if you still have the same question?
Yeah, that's huge. And especially you touched on something about that whole training period is that not only are you training people in information, but you're also training them on how to operate within the function of the business. And so if you allow them to come to you with every single question and you answer it, then you're effectively training them that they don't need to use their brain in a certain way. They can just use your brain and just continue coming to you with every single question instead of being problem
Yeah,
solvers.
you
And so
nailed
I
it.
think that's so huge. Can you dive a little bit deeper into what does your training program look like? Obviously, you've got some SOPs, you've got playbooks. Do you have a formal training program where there's like benchmarks and timelines? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, it's different for every role. Maybe one thing I'll just say before going into that is the beauty of having the larger team is that I'm not necessarily the one training people anymore. When we hire a cold caller, I have a cold calling manager and I have 6 other cold callers. And so that cold caller gets trained by the cold calling manager, gets trained on old phone calls, gets trained on some of our old trainings that we've recorded because we have weekly trainings for the cold callers, and then does some shadowing, but very quickly just gets on the phone, maybe half a day of training and then on the phone, because really most of it is just reps. But pretty much all of our other roles, it's the same kind of thing. What I like is I like everybody who comes into the business to have a pretty good understanding of the front to back land business. So they just understand where they fit in the picture. And so I still use a lot of Clint Turner's videos that he put out, like that Learn Land created back in like 2019, 2020, to just explain how this business really works. I think they're still good. Maybe some of the methods and tools have changed since then, but the gist of it is still there. Like how to comp is still basically the same. It's not like comping has really changed. There's maybe a couple other tools you use. How to sell land hasn't really changed. There might just be other platforms that you list them on. How to market, how to talk to sellers, none of that stuff has really changed. It's just maybe we have different medium to reach out to, or more opportunity in cold calling or texting that people didn't use as frequently back then. But those videos are really good for, so we select a couple of those and have them watch all those. That's most of it. But I try really hard to get people into the job as quickly as possible, like just doing the role and getting reps. If there's any critical tasks, like transaction coordination is a good example. Again, there's some very critical tasks. If you miss your due diligence dates, if you don't decide yes or no, I'm going to buy this property, then you could lose your earnest money. And that's like a real cost, right? Or if you're not paying attention to when a closing is and you need an extension or something like that, you're not on top of getting it, you may lose a deal because you need that extension and your TC wasn't on. Like, those are very critical tasks. And so that's a role where you really want to be on top of, especially when you bring somebody in new. But for the other roles, I'm totally fine with people failing and learning and improving. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Failing is part of learning process. Like it's actually part of the educational psychology timeline. So, can you talk a little bit about how do you structure communication with your team? You've got 21 people. What type of platforms are you using for communication? Let's just start with that.
Yeah. So we use Slack. Slack is, I think, pretty prevalent in the small business entrepreneurship kind of, or small company realm. We have the paid version so we can have chat history. I think we used to use the free version, but we found with 21 people, you get up to that 10,000 message limit pretty quick. And then you're trying to find some information somebody sent you last month and you're like, I can't find it. So we're on the paid version, which is really nice. The team has some of the select members of the team have paid Zoom, so they can set up Zooms with folks. Some we don't use email much to communicate internally, except for to send maybe sometimes forwarding emails from vendors or from contractors and things like that between me and my assistant and my sales manager, some of the leadership team. But for the most part, it's just Zoom and Slack on a day-to-day basis. We have a weekly team meeting where everybody's on the call, everybody's sharing video, which is really fun because sometimes people are shy and they're like, I like this call, for example. I'm sure people are busy. It's 6:30 Central Time. If this was the call that I dialed into and everybody had no videos, I'd be like, come on, guys. Like we sit behind our computers all day long and we don't see each other. We're all working remotely. Let's get some videos on. Let's see each other's smiling faces. And
Yeah,
so we have
that's really important. That's really important, especially when you have a remote team. I don't think, I think at this point, post-COVID, I think a lot of people have figured that out, that it's definitely a different kind of a work environment from being in person. But I know for me, I totally took it for granted of like the power of just being able to see someone else's face. And so like when you've got 21 people that are around the world, like I would imagine it's very important that they could
yeah.
like see that, oh, I'm talking to a real human being.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I really don't. It's one of my pet peeves, honestly, is when people don't turn on their video. I get it. There's some situations where you shouldn't, like, I get it. I totally get it. But if at all possible, my expectation is my team turns on the video. So yeah, we have that meeting once a week and it's a really good touch point. That's my time to give the team updates. I'm pretty transparent with what's going on in our business, so everybody understands what's happening. And then we go through sales, acquisitions, and like transaction coordination updates. So acquisitions will kind of give an update of deals in the pipeline, contracts out, like what are we expecting? How many we get last week? How many are we going for this week? And then sales will do the same thing with properties. And then transactions will tell us, hey, these are the properties we're buying, we're acquiring. Here's the properties we're selling. Just get everybody on the same page. And then at the end of the meeting, I have the team share wins. I really like hearing the good things that are happening in people's lives. And so we just, I don't call on anybody. They know the drill at this point. At first I was like pulling teeth. I was like, tell us guys, share the good things that are happening in your lives. I'll share mine. But it's nice. It's really nice to just hear what good things are happening in people's life. This week, my cold calling manager, Vicky, her mom had cancer earlier this year, and it was really scary. But she just had her 8-month checkup, and she's cancer free, and it's incredible.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It was just so
That's,
happy. We all get to
wow.
celebrate on the call, just like that miracle, and it just made me so happy. And I know like Vicky was very happy. Everybody was happy, and it just lifted everybody up and made us more of a team because we understand what's happening in each other's lives a little more deeply than just not sharing video on Zoom and nobody talking.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important. Again, just to be able to create that sort of like culture of this is a team, we care about each other, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. Can you talk a little bit about whenever you are leading these team meetings, how long typically are these meetings? And is this the only widespread team meeting that you guys have, or do you have like different departmental meetings throughout the course of
Yeah.
the
Good
week? What does
question.
that look like?
Good question. This is the one that I lead every week. It's usually 30 minutes. I have it scheduled for an hour because sometimes we have a little bit more things to share, but I try to keep it short and sweet, keep the updates pretty quick because a lot of the stuff that I'm giving isn't like 100% relevant to every single person. I don't want to waste everybody's time by talking about things that they don't really matter, but I do want them to get a pulse on what's happening. And so it's important to me just to see them every week for one, share the wins, and then give them just a weekly update. Yeah, that's good. And then, so each department has their own meetings. Sales has I think two meetings a week that they have. And then my sales manager meets one-on-one with each of his assistants every week to go through things. The cold calling and the acquisitions team as a whole. So cold calling and all the other cold outreach team members all meet on Mondays for an hour to do call reviews and go through any kind of issues that they're had or things that they're seeing, ask for advice from other people of how do I overcome this objection, so on and so forth. So that's a meeting we have each week. We have a leadership team meeting. We use EOS. And so each week we have a level 10 meeting on Thursdays, actually from 10 to 11:30, where we go through and talk about issues, follow up on our to-dos, review the rocks and see what progress is being made, check over KPIs, share a couple good things that are happening, so on and so forth. We just follow the meeting, really follow the meeting. And then the other kind of big meeting is our transaction coordination meeting, which that's a very, now that we have 50, 60 properties either being bought or sold right now, like at one time, there's a lot of moving pieces. And so we just need to be sure we're aligned on what needs to happen.
Yeah, really good stuff. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned earlier that you've got a mixture of different types of deals that you're doing, subdivides, flips. Can you talk about like what is the percentage roughly of what the like those 50, 60 deals that you've got going on? Are they mainly subdivides or half of them subdivides? Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about
Right now, about one in every 4 to 5 deals is minor or exempt, or in some cases, a major subdivision.
that? Nice.
So that's the ratio. It's probably closer to 1 in 5. So out of all, and so that when I said 60, that's like deals we have under contract to sell and deals we have under contract to purchase. I think it's probably like 36 to purchase right now. And so probably I'd have to look through to give you the exact number, but it's
Yeah.
somewhere around like 6 of those to 7 of those are subdivides.
Excellent. And are you doing any wholesaling, double closing? Are you doing traditional and flips, or what does that look like?
Yeah, right now we're buying everything. We're not doing any wholesaling or double closing. That's not to say we're not trying. We're just not necessarily prioritizing it. I'll either fund or line up funding partners for all the deals. And I think for me, I like to protect the margin. I don't need to wholesale necessarily because if I could, let me take a step back. Wholesaling is really dependent, in my opinion, on high sell-through rate markets. If you're going to wholesale, if you're going to double close, one of the most important things is being able to line up a buyer very quickly. So you need to be in a high demand, high sell-through rate market. And we are much more generalist. Like we are marketing to areas that a lot of people maybe aren't, because I don't necessarily care all that much about sell-through rate. I think it's important and I love high sell-through rate areas, but I think there's lots of really good deals to be had in maybe slower moving markets. And the pricing that we pay just goes into that calculation of, hey, how long do we expect to hold this? If the sell-through rates once every all the properties sell in 12 months, then I may have to hold this for a year to get whatever the market value is. And so it's just a calculation on every property. Should we do this? Should we not? For properties that are in high sell-through rate markets, yeah, we're going to try to double close and get those things moving, but it's not really a priority for us.
Cool. And so, can you drill down a little bit on your approach to subdivides in this current market? So, what are you seeing in terms of what the expectations are for the buyers with their pricing and valuations of the properties? There's a lot of talk right now about, and there are some people that are like, "Oh, don't even touch stuff that's not moving very quickly at all because of the risk." So can you just talk a little bit about how you approach that? What's your philosophy? And give us a 30,000 foot view of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. With subdivides, I said this in the beginning about monetizing all your leads, but I see it as just a really useful tool to be able to pay more money for a property. Like when any deal comes across my desk, the first thing I think is, what is the highest and best use that I can do with this land? What is the highest and best use? And if it's a subdivide, regardless of whether or not we can flip it or we have it at a flip price or something, or we can wholesale it or whatever, I am going to go down the subdivide route. I always do. I
Yeah.
always do. And maybe just to touch on balancing risk, when you buy your properties and take title yourself and you have equity in those deals, there is an opportunity risk for your money for sure. If you can't flip that thing quickly or can't turn over your cash reasonably quickly, you will limit the amount of deals you can do with that cash. And maybe the next deal you have, you may not have enough money for. And so you have to go out and raise money from a funding partner or whatever. And you have to give up some equity and you'll make maybe less money on that next deal. And there's an opportunity cost to that. But if the investment thesis is sound, if the comps support, if the area can support, and you just have to wait a little bit longer, it doesn't cost that much to hold. Taxes are cheap. I mean, they really are. They're really not very expensive. And you can leverage those properties too. So like I have a property right now. It's not a very expensive property. I bought it. It's a 24 acres in Georgia that I bought for 85 or $90,000 or something like that. We have listed at 220. And I think we'll sell for around 200. We haven't been willing to take some of the offers we've had in the mid 100s. And I'd like a little more liquidity right now. And so I approached a local bank and I said, hey, I have this property. Here's what I think it's worth, but here's what I bought it for. And will you give me an 80% loan to value on my purchase price? And they said, yes. And so we're just working through the getting a loan cash back or cash out refinance on it right now. And yeah, right now I have maybe $90,000 tied up, but next week I'll get $70,000 back and I'll have 20 grand in for the potential to make another 150, 200K. And that cash on cash return obviously is substantially higher on that money. And then I can put that 65 grand to work in another deal.
That's
It,
fantastic.
and if you wholesale, for example, you don't really have equity in deals. You're transaction dependent. Your business is completely dependent on finding buyers, and you don't have that flexibility of actually taking title.
Yeah, that's really good. You've been doing this for a few years now. How have you seen the market shift around, particularly around these subdivide type deals in the last, let's say, 12 months?
Yeah, and just more people are understanding that it's a great strategy and are working to do it. I haven't seen it really like impact the areas that I'm working in. We're still consistently identifying good subdivide deals, good off market subdivide deals to do. I haven't really seen a huge change in seller sentiment because there's more people doing subdivides. I think that in general, there's more people working, trying to do land flipping, land investing. And so we have seen a lot more people with unrealistic price expectations. Just a mispriced mailer or two that folks send out, and you're on the phone with the seller, and the seller says, oh, I got this other offer for 400 grand. And the property is only worth about 250, maybe maximum. And it's just tough. It's really tough for the sellers. Obviously, it's tough for you, but it's part of the business. Your job is to negotiate, and at least your acquisitions manager's job is to negotiate and explain why your offer is a good offer. And if you can't get it done, then you can't get it done. We'll put that person in a follow up and we'll see if they got that 400K offer in 6 months.
Yeah, please take it. Please take that
And,
400.
and I literally, yeah, man, we talk to folks that are like, hey, I got this other offer and it's really a really good high offer, I will advise them to take it like immediately. I'm like, I think you should take that offer. If that's a real offer, you should absolutely take it because I think that's a great offer for your property.
Yeah. And I'll give you a referral fee if you can send that buyer my way because I have some land that I'd love to sell,
I know. Yeah,
at
exactly.
200%. Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about what would you consider to be your bread and butter type deals? You mentioned about one in every four, one every five is subdivides. What are you seeing still is being like the most demand type of property product on the market right now?
Yeah. Honestly, the biggest demand properties are properties that you can, like, for me, rural properties that you can put a mobile home on. That is
Mm,
what a lot of people want. And honestly, it depends on the market you're in. Okay, some markets are a little more expensive than others. I'm really heavy in Alabama, and for me, most of the properties that sell reasonably quickly are things priced in like the 30 to 60K range, right in that people can owner finance pretty easily. They can get a bank loan pretty easily. It's about the price of a car. It's not like this crazy expense. Those things move pretty quick. If you can put a mobile on it, if it's got good road frontage, if it's priced under 60K, those move reasonably quickly.
that's great. And so are you creating any notes on the sell side of things or what
Yeah,
does that
got
look
my paper stack shirt on from like the guys gave me at Ajay's event.
Yeah, I
Yeah, man,
love it.
that's a huge strategy that we use to sell and move properties quickly is generating owner finance notes. I have no problem doing it. I love generating owner finance notes. I just love the flexibility of them. You can hold them on your books. You can get some cash flow if you'd like. You can turn your vacant piece of land into a truly passive cash flowing investment. Sure, there's a risk of foreclosure. Sure, you might have to take it back and then resell it again for more money. But honestly, that wouldn't bother me so much because I'd be able to foreclose and then immediately sell the land for probably a similar price. Now, I don't want that to happen. And so I'd never want to be, I would never want anyone to consider me like a predatory lender or anything like that. I'm very careful about credit checks. I want to really truly understand that person can afford the land. Like we will never do a large balloon without some very clear liquidity event that the borrower has in the future. Like if they're planning to build a home, for example, and they're going to do a cash out refi, that might be a case where we would consider a balloon. But I don't want anybody to hit with some huge bill in 2 years and then not be able to pay it and have to foreclose. So we try to be compassionate. We're also in the business of making money. And so my interest rates are higher than a bank. And part of that is just to encourage folks to go to a bank. If they can get a bank loan, they should go to a bank. I'd prefer that because it'd be cash for me. I don't have to sell the note at a discount. But then you've
Yeah.
also turned this vacant piece of land into a paper asset, a mortgage, where there's an entire network of buyers that are looking for those to purchase.
Yeah, can you dive into that a little bit more? Because I think that's something that a lot of people are starting to consider. Okay, if I still want some cash, like larger cash lump sums, maybe I could create a note and then sell the note. Can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about how you go about doing that and what that type of deal looks like?
Yeah, I think that is a fantastic strategy. Yeah. So for, when you own a piece of land, a vacant piece of land, there's you have buyers for that land that want that land for some reason. Either they want to build a home on it, they want to hunt on it, they want to do something on it, but that's it. You're limited to only people that want that specific, unique parcel. Now, when you generate a mortgage, now you have any person at all that wants to buy a discounted cash flow. And what I mean by that is, hey, if this note is paying you $1,000 a month, and maybe the principal value of the note is $50,000 or something like that, and over the life of the note, maybe it pays out 70. I don't know, whatever. I'm just making up numbers here, but you'll get the point. The principal value is 50,000. It's paying you consistently $1,000 a month for some period of time. Somebody is willing to pay you today a dollar amount for all of that future cash flow. Now it's less, it's going to be less than your principal value, but it's still a dollar amount. And because they're saying, okay, I can pay cash right now, maybe it's $40,000 for this $50,000 principal note that's going to pay me $1,000 a month. And that is going to give me a very well established return. And so I can pay that money now. I know exactly what I can expect for the next 5 years. And that security, that like consistency, people are willing to pay for that future cash flow. And that's essentially what you're doing when you sell a mortgage is you're selling a cash flow that is collateralized by a real asset.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Only Land Fans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action.
And so when generating notes, there's a couple like really key things you need to make sure you do. One, don't generate a land contract or a contract for deed. They're you as the seller or the lender, those protect you more, but they're not very attractive to no buyers. So if your goal is to sell the mortgage, you don't want that. You want a true deed of trust or a mortgage, or if you're doing deals in Louisiana, it's called a credit deed. And those are financial instruments that are collateralized by the land, but title of the land actually transfers to the buyer. If you do a land contract, you're running a bit higher liability risk than you realize because you still have title to the land. And so if that borrower does something crazy, Matt Wall, I don't know if anybody here knows Matt Wall, but Matt Wall has a crazy story about writing up a land contract to somebody who almost burned down. Like, anyway, it was nuts. I'm not going to get into the details. It's a pretty crazy story. Matt Wall, you can ask him about it. But yeah, you just have a lot more liability because you own title. You're on title. And most no buyers don't want that. So generate a good mortgage, get title insurance, get a lender's policy that protects the principal value, underwrite the borrower at a minimum of credit check. But if you can do an RMLO, registered mortgage lending officer, I don't know, RMLO, don't quote me on the acronym, but it basically is having like a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, like full underwriting to verify the borrower. Those are really good. People love to see those. That means the borrower is a good borrower. And they can, because when somebody's buying a note, their biggest worry is this person going to pay me? Are they actually going to pay? And those type of things, underwriting, credit check, RMLO, all of those things give that note buyer that confidence that they're going to repay. But maybe the very last thing, Kendall, I'm sorry,
Yeah. No,
is
my gosh, go ahead.
the note has to be like, it has to be a good note. Like the underlying asset has to be worth more. Like you can't generate a note that's underwater and immediately because you're able to sell it to some poor person who bought a property way too high. Like you've got to actually have a legit property that is worth more than the note. There has to be some sort of loan to value on it. Nobody's going to buy a mortgage that is already underwater because if somebody doesn't pay and they have to foreclose, they're going to lose money. Nobody's going to buy that.
Yeah, can you give us an example of what like the numbers might look like on something like that?
Yeah, let's say you bought this 10-acre tract in the middle of Texas. It's worth $200,000 or something like that. Or that's the day you sold it for $200,000 and you sold to somebody owner financing 20,000 down and you generated 100 or $40,000 down rather 20% and you generated $160,000 mortgage. That would be a good note for somebody because especially if the property is worth 200,000, they have 80% loan to value. And so or if they had to foreclose immediately, they could probably resell it and capture that equity right back. Maybe that's an example of a note that's not underwater. A note that would be underwater is if you bought some desert square that's maybe worth $5,000 and you sold it to some poor soul for 20 grand and generated with $100 down. $100 a month or something like that, and then try to sell that mortgage, well, the property's not worth what the mortgage is, so nobody's going to buy that.
Yeah, really good. So, where do you typically go to find note buyers? If you're looking to sell some notes, where do you go?
I go to, man, PaperStack needs to compensate me for all these like shout outs, but I'm a big fan. I really like the platform. I use PaperStack. I will list my notes on PaperStack. It's a note buying marketplace. It's really smooth, it's really slick. You go on and you list your note and you put all this information about it. You upload the documents, the mortgage, the deed of trust, the deed, the lender's title insurance policy, the promissory note. Those are the main documents, and any other documentation you have. If you have an RMLO or some other underwriting file, an appraisal, or some other broker's price opinion or some value of the land, you upload a couple pictures of it, and then you pick your price. And I generally target maybe like an 18% yield, 17 and a half, 18% yield for the end buyer, which is a pretty attractive price. We usually sell our notes pretty quickly, but you can certainly you certainly list them at a lower yield. You just want them to be like really solid notes if you're going to do a much lower yield than that. Most people find land to be a little more risky. There's no structure yet. Nobody like lives there. Homes are much easier to sell at a lower yield to the note buyer because people have a sense of permanence when they live in a home. Like they don't want to give up their home. They don't want to lose their house. But losing some other vacant piece of land, it's not as big a risk. So you can sell them at a little bit higher yield.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Do you service your own notes in-house, or do you have a company that services your notes?
I probably should have a company. I use Your Land Loans, JT's program, to service my notes. I was doing it in like QuickBooks before. I was just like manually sending invoices and like doing all this stuff. But when I saw Your Land Loans came out, I know a lot of people have used GeekPay. I think Your Land Loans is far superior, and JT's on top of it. Like I literally I've sold a lot of notes, and so I accidentally deleted the notes instead of just canceling them in the platform. And when you delete them, it like literally gets rid of everything, all the past
Mhm.
information. And so I was going through trying to balance my books with my bookkeeper. And I'm like, I can't find any of these transactions. And so I reached out to JT, customer support on Your Landlords, and he sent me all my ACH transactions over the last year. So now I can reconcile my books. But he's a great guy, great program. But it's a little bit of work. You got to create the note in there. You got to follow up. They have a lot of automations, but it makes it really easy. Another way to do it that most people really like, and this will make your notes more valuable, more saleable, because a lot of the note buyers on PaperStack want them to be really passive. They want them to be managed by a note buyer. And what's it, Madison Note Services, or Madison, I think that's what it's called. They're a company that services notes for people, and they charge $25 a month. And then they charge, I think it's like $150 for an onboarding fee for a mortgage, but they take care of everything. Like they will
Mm,
do everything. They'll collect your payments, they'll give you all your statements, all your tax stuff. And then they also have attorneys that can help with foreclosure proceedings. It's probably additional cost if you have to go through that stuff, but they do have that stuff in house. So a lot of people really like going to Madison.
nice. Very good. Love that. So, can you talk about how did you manage to do 20 subdivide deals in the space of 2 years? I know some people that are like, I want one a year. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah. A lot of them are really not hard. I think that's probably like maybe, I don't know if it's a myth or not, but some of these rural lot splits, exempt subdivides specifically, are as easy as hiring a surveyor and splitting it up. And I have right now, I have five larger subdivides that are either under contract to purchase that we're working through, or we're in the middle of selling, or we're almost done selling. And those are larger, I would say, buy price. I think all of them, the lowest of them was 650,000 or something buy price. They're all total sales over 1 million. And those are, those take a lot of time, but that's not the majority of them, right? That's only five. The other 50, I don't even know how many it is, honestly. It's maybe more like 25 or something. Most of them are really small. Some of them were as simple as I bought a 10-acre tract in Georgia. I looked at the county subdivision regs, and it said that if your lots are over 3 acres, it's an exempt subdivision, no approvals. You just get a survey and you can sell off the lots individually. So I hired a surveyor. I literally said, "Hey, can you split this into three?" He split into three, and we sold the lots. There was like nothing. That was it. It was so easy to do. And then there's
Nice.
other developments that I've done that it took 8 months, 9 months to get through county approvals. We had to build $110,000 worth of detention ponds. And we had to do all of these engineering studies and water flow studies, and it took a long time.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to people who are looking to do some subdivides and obviously we're looking in rural areas where there might not be a ton of comps that are out there to help them to value? So how do you
I
go
know
about
that's so
that
hard.
that
Yeah.
valuation process?
Yeah, that's really hard. When there's not very many comps, it's really hard to value those things. In really rural areas, if there is a mobile home demand there, like if there's demand for mobile homes, Google where Clayton Homes are or where like other mobile home builders are. And if your property is close to those, then there's probably a mobile home demand there. Affordable land that people can own or finance and put a mobile home on will pretty much always sell. And I feel like it doesn't really matter where I am in rural, especially in rural Alabama, which is not a high dollar market. It's probably one of the lower areas. It's not as low as like the desert, right? Because it's like more useful land than that. But in terms of price per acre, it's relatively low price per acre. But we can still sell 5 acre tracts in the $5,000 an acre range just as a minimum, pretty much wherever we are in rural Alabama. And you can often buy larger tracts for 2,000 to 2,300 an acre in those same areas. So sometimes I don't have really great comps to support. I just know what has worked in the past. I've experienced in those markets. And so we'll do it. And then the other thing is, I would say I wouldn't be scared to get a property under contract for more than what I should. So a lot of people are worried about, should I get this under contract? Oh, I didn't quite get to my price. If you're unsure, I would still, sorry, my children have come into my room.
It's all good.
Anyway, I got a little sidetrack there. I would still work to get the property under contract and make sure I could figure out whether or not I could make it work. I would hire a local broker. I would go talk to people. I would try to figure out something like, what is this worth? Now I have control of the property. Now I can do a much more detailed due diligence. I think a lot of people jump into or fall into the trap of maybe doing too much work and too much due diligence up front before they actually have a contract, before they've actually gotten something signed. And I
Yeah.
think that in a lot of cases is a waste of time. It's a waste of your time. It's probably not. Yeah. You can, I tell my team, I say, hey, look, don't lose more than $500 on a deal. Like you can do everything, get it completely under contract. I won't even look at it until we've got it under contract, but just don't commit me to lose more than $500. So that means they can go up to $500 of like non-refundable due diligence money. They can put more in earnest. We do earnest money on everything. Usually do about 1%. It helps smooth over contracts pretty well, but don't commit me to lose $500. Give me enough due diligence period to do my research.
How much do you guys typically pay for your due diligence periods?
We try not to do non-refundable due diligence. The way we structure our contracts is a due diligence period. My like entering argument or like entering pitch to people, if they don't say anything, is 90 days of due diligence, which I know is a long time, but we've started getting surveys on almost every property. We've started getting soil tests on almost every property. And sometimes, especially in rural places, that can take 2 months to get a surveyor scheduled and actually out there to the property. And I also want the flexibility, right? I'm closing a lot of transactions and I want to be able to move something up or move something back and have some movement there. So if nobody has a problem with that, if they say, okay, then that's our going argument. So we usually I almost always put 1% for larger. Like I just got a deal under contract in Tennessee through a partner that brought it to me. And I had to put 5% in earnest, which was almost $34,000. I got $33,750 in earnest right now. And I was like, God, this sucks because it's going to be tied up and I'm still doing my
Yeah.
due diligence and I can't put that money to work, but that was what the seller wanted. And I think it's a good deal. And so it was worth it.
And that earnest money, just to clarify for everyone listening, that is refundable, right?
That is
So
refundable.
got it.
Yes. So in the contract, I generally don't write contingents. I have a couple contingencies. It's good access and clear title. Those are non-negotiable contingencies. So if we don't get a title report back until the week of closing and we find out, hey, this easement the seller told us was there isn't actually there and it doesn't have legal access, then even though I might be past my due diligence period, my earnest money is coming back because I'm not going to buy that property. Um, yeah, yeah. So during that due diligence period, we can cancel for any reason whatsoever. If we say, hey, it didn't meet our criteria, we found something out we didn't like, then we can get that earnest money back. Once we pass that due diligence period, that earnest money becomes hard. And so we just canceled a contract this week on a deal that we bought too high. We tried to double close it and it just was too high. I expected the timber value to be a little bit higher than it was. It came back a lot lower than I was expecting, which it is what it is. But we still thought we could double close it. We lined up a couple people. We had somebody interested, but then we got basically too far into it and they just weren't comfortable with the assignment or double close situation. And so we just canceled the deal and we lost $1,000 in earnest. And it is what it is. It happens.
It happens, yeah, for sure. That earnest money, what do you say to sellers that are like, "Yeah, I want the check. Like, you need to send me the check." How do you deal with that objection?
Yeah, I won't send somebody a check unless I've talked to them, like person to person. So I'm on, like me on the phone with them. Typically, I say, "Hey, we hold this in escrow with the closing attorney." That's the normal way to do it. But if it's a nice, if it's I did this on a subdivide in Alabama in Lee County near Auburn, the seller wanted 5,700 in earnest as a check, but I was the one negotiating on that contract, so I had the relationship and the rapport, and he's a stand up guy, and I trusted him that he would release it, and so I gave it to him. But if it was just some random flip of somebody my acquisitions manager negotiated with, I would just say no. We'll put the earnest money with the closing attorney. That's it.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, you mentioned earlier that you made some transitions from texting to cold calling. I know that is a monumental feat. Just having an in-house texting arm is can be very difficult, very challenging. Switching those people over to cold calling, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have seen running an in-house cold calling department?
Yeah, cold calling is a hard job. I don't know if anybody listening has tried cold calling. I put myself in the shoe for a few hours, a couple times, and it is really hard. Like it's constant rejection. So yeah, it's a hard job and it requires some mental resilience to get over rejection over and over and over again. And when you have a completely remote team that is all working in their own, especially a Filipino team that's working in the middle of the night, it's pretty easy to get to a dark spot, right? You get yelled at, you get cursed at. People are taking their issues out on you and you don't know who they are. Like they have no idea who you are. You're just some faceless person that they can yell at because you were a slight inconvenience to them in the middle of their day. And so building a strong rapport with the team, building a place where the team can come together and discuss and talk and build each other up. That was the challenge is overcoming all that kind of negativity around it. And the solution is building a team culture where people enjoy working with one another. And so we do a couple things that are really fun. We have a monthly competition for who can get the most, which team, like we split the acquisitions team up into teams, and whichever teams get the most contracts signed, they get a bonus. They get money. And at the beginning of the month, they pick team names. And so it's really funny. I think this month is Soil Sisters is one of them. And the other one is, we have one guy on the cold outreach team. His name's Jesse. So it's Jesse's something angels or something like that. I don't know. They just come up with these funny names and there's a bit of competition, but fun competition. We change the teams up every month. So it's not really like unfair. Like one team gets some advantage. So that's a little bit of what we do. And then they have a constant chat going all day long. I'm seeing them message one another and say, "Hey, I had this lead and this da da da," and they're free to get on the phone with one another and talk throughout the day. Um,
That's
so
awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Now, you mentioned bonus just now. Can you talk a little bit about some of the compensation structures that you have for your team?
yeah. So right now, everybody has a base. Everybody has a base salary, but I really want people to have a drive to do more. I want people rowing in the same direction. And so a pretty substantial percentage of the team's compensation is tied directly to gross profit of the business. So whatever gross profit we make at the end, and I don't do net profit because net profit is so variable with whether we're scaling, how much OpEx we're spending, did we hire a new employee, did we have some huge mail purchase or whatever. So I do it based on gross profit. So it's consistent. And then every month they get a bonus. I carve out, it's like a profit share. I carve out a piece of the profit and I distribute it to the team. So that's how the overseas team works. The US team gets a little higher commission structure than the overseas team does. That cost of living is much higher here. So it is what it is. But that's how we do it. Everybody gets a profit share and that keeps people driving. So it's like it creates this social pressure on the team to perform. Because if one person isn't holding up their end of the bargain, if they're not putting in the work, they're not just hurting themselves, they're hurting every single person at the company. Everyone is hurting. And they know that, right? And so it creates this drive to work harder for not just yourself, but for everybody else, because everyone's going to benefit from that increased work, from that extra contract you get, from that extra like push to try to get past that no. Everyone's going to benefit.
Yeah, that's really good. And how do you go about finding the right personality to put on your team?
Dude, what a good, right question, Kendall.
Calling all ambitious land flippers, ready to transform your business with proven systems and processes? Imagine this. One of my students recently closed 2 land deals and got another under contract in just 24 hours. That's the power of a well-oiled land flipping machine. My exclusive coaching program is specifically designed for action takers just like you. We'll build out your entire operation from lead gen to dispo, implementing these systems on real deals from day one. But hurry, I'm only accepting 3 new students until 2025. If you've done deals, have a growth mindset, and are ready to scale, visit kindlecall.com now. Let's turn your land business into a consistent profit powerhouse.
I want positive, energetic people. That's what I want on the team. I think I can turn it back on now. Okay. I think that especially for like cold calling, maybe let's just say anybody who's customer facing needs to be a positive, energetic, happy person. I think that your attitude and the way that you are in just like an interview and a conversation with somebody, that's going to translate to the phone. So like smile, like everybody knows, or most people should know, if you smile when you talk, like people can hear it. They can hear it in your voice. They can something just changes. And if somebody is like very monotone or has like downward inflections in their voice and kind of has, I don't want to say like a flat personality because it's not really what I mean, but I think you understand what I mean. Somebody's maybe more level or steady. That's not a great customer outreach person. So I want people that are motivated by doing more. Like I want people who are, and maybe this is like a little personal reflection. You hire people that kind of mirror you or your attitudes. When I was working at ExxonMobil, one of the things that really frustrated me about it was it didn't matter how hard I worked. It did. Like I got more satisfaction. I got some praise, but like financially, it didn't matter. And over time, you get a couple of pay raises and they're like 3% this year and they're like 5% next year. And you realize, why am I like spending time with my family and my wife and like working these extra hours and like really pushing it for peanuts? Inflation was greater than that pay increase. I actually got a pay decrease if you really consider it. And so that's one of the reasons why I started the business, both to have mastery over my own time, but also to be able to be compensated commensurate with my input and my energy and my work into the company. And so I want people that have that same mentality because it means they're going to put more in because they know they're going to get more out.
Yeah, that's really good. And so when you are in the hiring process and you are interviewing these people, reading through their CVs and things like that, how do you filter for that? How do you, is there anything in particular? Do you
Yeah.
ask them certain questions or how do you go about doing that?
Yeah.
Personality?
The first thing I do is ask when I'm interviewing like large groups of people for a role or whatever, is I send them a video interview and I ask them 2 questions. I ask them what motivates them and I ask them why are they the best person for the job. And it's really simple, okay? But what I want is I want confident people who can talk passionately about something and show me that passion. Like, what motivates you? If you can't be passionate about what motivates you, like, you're probably not going to be passionate about much. And if you can't brag about yourself of why you're the best person, you probably don't have enough confidence for some of these customer outreach roles. And so those are 2 really good, in my opinion, screening questions. And then after that, there's a bit of a kind of a skills like interview assessment, talking about their past, their history, their work history. But for the most part, that's it. It's like those questions. A lot of these roles we're hiring for, though, Kendall, they're not highly skilled positions. And I'd argue that a good cold caller is a highly skilled position, but at first I don't necessarily need them to be, because they're not doing sales necessarily on the phone. They're not like we're not making offers, right? Their
Right.
goal, especially as a cold caller or cold outreach, a texter or whatever, their goal is to qualify a lead, to build credibility with our company and our brand by being kind, by being happy, by being somebody they want to talk to ask good questions and then pass the lead along. That's their job. They don't need to be exceptional salespeople. They just need to be nice. They need to be friendly. They need to be positive, and they need to have the mental, like the tenacity to overcome the no and the rejection.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Justin, for your business, do you officially hold the role of CEO?
Yeah, I guess I do. I don't really have a, I think I'm like managing member per my operating agreement. But yes, I
Got it.
do. I am the CEO of Scoutland Group.
Isn't that sexy, CEO?
Yeah, it
So,
does sound good. Although I'll tell you this one thing. I think I updated my LinkedIn maybe a year ago or something and put CEO, and I started getting all these cold DMs from people about things. And so I changed it to
totally.
owner, back to owner, because I didn't like all these cold DMs I was getting, like, as CEO of Scout Land Group. That's so impressive. And I'm like, you
Oh
have no
yeah.
idea who I am. So
Okay, so for our purposes today, you are the CEO of a company that has done 20 subdivides in the last 2 years, 21 team members, quite an amount of growth. What advice would you give someone today that's wanting to enter the land space and maybe they've done, let's say maybe they've done a few deals, they've flipped, but now they want to start scaling. What advice would you give someone new to scaling, given your experience?
yeah, I think it's twofold. The first piece of advice that I've already touched on was there's like a balance, right, between hiring too early and hiring too late. And it's hard to say for everybody what that is. But one thing I think, sorry, let me turn
You're
off the video
good.
for a sec.
You're good. No, no.
One thing that I think is really important is pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. Like, you've got to feel the pain a little bit to know what your threshold is before just bringing somebody in. And maybe that sounds a little bit abstract, but I think there is a risk of hiring too early before you've really figured everything out and you figured out what you can handle, and then getting really frustrated that you're spending more money than you should and you're not seeing the results that you want to see. So I think that's a risk. So you've really got to balance and figure out for you where that threshold is. And then the other side of that coin is you have to be introspective and recognize where you're the bottleneck and actually feel confident handing that off to someone. Like, a lot of us who start these companies, right? There are babies at first, right? They're like, I am all in on this company. This is mine, but you can't do it all. I just had this conversation with my team this week. I was like, man, I am so grateful for you guys. Look at all these things we've been able to accomplish together. There's just no way I would be able to handle this many. Like, I'm not going to be calling 15,000 people a day myself. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to
Right.
be able to answer 20 something thousand letters. I'm not going to be like, I can't do that. I can't negotiate with 20 leads a day. Like, it's just, I don't have time. So you have to recognize that if you want to get to a certain place, you've got to bring people in, and you've got to be comfortable that 80% as good as you would do it is good enough. It's never going to be 100%. And eventually you'll get to a point where you're hiring people that are actually better than you at the job. And that's where the magic really happens. But at first, you might not be there. Maybe you just got to be okay with, hey, this person can do the job well enough, and I can move on to do more important, more revenue driving things that like give me life. I know you've read the book Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell.
Yep.
Great book, great book. And
Fantastic.
one of the things he talks about in there is doing an assessment of your time, figuring out what you do, and then breaking down all the tasks in your business that you're responsible for into those four quadrants, right? The things that don't give you life, that don't drive revenue, but they're necessary tasks. Those are the first things to hire out, right? So you can focus on the things that do drive revenue or that you enjoy, right? And then there are the revenue driving tasks that you don't enjoy. Get those out too. The things that, and then that way you can only focus on the things that you enjoy on the other side. The stuff that drives revenue, which is the most important place for you to spend your time, and the stuff that just builds you up. Because like life is about a lot of things, but like, you want to live your life well. You want to enjoy it. You don't want to create this incredibly stressful, like, just slog of a job for yourself. You want to build a company that gives you freedom.
Yeah, that's so important. And I also think that it even goes beyond. I know that it sounds like really good to be like, yeah, I'll delegate everything that I don't enjoy doing. That way I don't have to do it. But I think it goes so much deeper than that because decision fatigue is a real thing. Bandwidth is a real thing. So if you're allowing tons of things that kind of pull your bandwidth and pull that energy away from you, you don't have enough time to do the things like right visions for the company or think about creative ways of scaling. And so I think that it goes beyond that whole idea of, yeah, you're the company owner, so you don't have to do those things. For me, at least, it's you're protecting what only you can do in your business, which is create that vision and have that creativity to grow.
100% said.
Yeah. So last question that I want to chat with you about is we had talked about that you are founding a new podcast.
It's
Congratulations on
true.
your new
Thank you.
podcast. Yeah, the Ground Game podcast. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Kendall. So I have in my business received so much value from Only Land fans, from Ari Tipster, from the Casual Fridays guys, from Jaron and Drew when they're doing Land Mavericks podcasts. There's just so many really good podcasts out there that where people are coming every week and just providing incredible value. And I've benefited immensely from it. And one of the things that I really enjoy is teaching. I really enjoy coaching. I really enjoy helping others build up their businesses. And I was thinking about the podcast space. And one thing I started to think maybe a little bit more recently is I'm not getting maybe as much out of some of these podcasts as I used to. Like when I was a new investor, it was gold. Everything was gold because everything was new and everything was amazing. And I would take these things and implement them. But when I got up to a certain level, I was finding I'm getting a little bit here, a little bit there, but I'm not getting maybe as much as I used to. And a lot of people come on the podcast. I'm doing this right now. Everybody's listening to me talk, and I'm talking about all these amazing things that I do. Oh my gosh, Justin's so amazing. It's not all rainbows and butterflies. It is not. It is hard. Okay. And there are some things that we fail at. There are lots of things that we do poorly that we're improving on. We're adapting to the market. We're dealing with the same struggles that less experienced land investors are. Me and my co-host Clay, who is also doing this podcast with me, who I think is going to be on with you next week, right?
Yeah, he will be. Yep.
Okay, so if you're listening to this, come in next week because he's brilliant, high energy co-host of the Ground Game podcast. We're co-hosts together. Yep, co-hosts.
Love
Just
it.
to go back to what I kind of lost my train of thought there, but it's not all rainbows and butterflies. It is hard, and so I wanted to maybe shed a little more light on some of those challenges, and I wanted people to maybe understand what does it take to get to a seven-figure or more land investing business today. And what decisions are we making in our businesses to attempt to continue to scale? How are we looking at our quarterly and annual planning? What goals are we setting? How are we actually implementing to achieve those goals? What do we think about subdivides? What do we think about team building? How do we manage these teams? What is the next role we're hiring for? What's happening in the land market? But just to go a little bit deeper, maybe on two people as opposed to an incredible amount of information from a lot of people. I just thought there could be some value there. And plus, there's a bit of a selfish thing is that sometimes I struggle with accountability, right? Like I set these goals. Who's holding me accountable? My team, but it really relies on me. Now, if I'm going to go publicly talk about some of these goals that I have, if people are going to listen to it, now there's a whole nother level of accountability. So that's the selfish side is now I'm going to talk publicly about what I'm trying to do. And so I better work my butt off to achieve it or else I'm a fraud, right? Like I'm not doing what I said I was going to do. So that's the selfish side. But I just want to give back to the community, man.
Love it. So you and Clay will be pulling back the curtain on your own businesses and showing everyone the good, bad, the ugly of what's happening in your business. Is that right?
That's right. And so we've filmed 5 episodes so far, and a lot of it is more philosophy and bigger picture things that we're dealing with as seven-figure land investors. I think there's a lot of kind of background stuff that needs to be discussed, but then it'll reach into a more normal cadence of updates on our quarterly goals and deal reviews, and then obviously the topic du jour, whatever that might be.
Fantastic. And if someone wants to listen, where are you?
Okay. Yeah. Let's get. Okay. So I
Yeah.
just started yesterday. You liked my reel, so thank you,
Yeah, I
Kendall.
sure
I
did.
just
Yeah.
started yesterday, just putting some little stuff out on social media. We are going to launch the podcast on October 17th. That will be the day. So you do this, but I've never done a podcast. And so we're still figuring out all of the little systems, but we got the content, at least the first part made. We're in the process of editing it. The shell is there. It's just October 17th. We're going to launch. We're going to push the RSS feed to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. And so if you follow me on social media, you'll probably be getting a lot of posts from me about it because I'm trying to get it out there and get it launched. Sorry if it's annoying. Most of the time, it's probably not me actually making those posts. It's probably my social media manager doing it, but shameless, but it is what it is. You got to promote yourself, right, Kendall?
Yeah, I think it's important. I actually don't even look at it as promotion. I look at it as you're starting this podcast to give value and you need to let people know that like
That's
this.
a much better perspective, Ken.
So yeah, but listen, I'm so excited to check it out. I'll definitely be listening and wishing you all the best. I know that it's going to be really fantastic, and so I'm very excited to check it out. And if I can ever help in any way, I that's my jam.
Man, you already
I
are.
love
You're incredible. Yeah, I've gotten so much value from listening to the guests that you've had on here that have helped me solve so many different problems in my business. So you're an inspiration, honestly.
I'm very humbled by that. Thank you so much. And we wouldn't be anything or anywhere near where we are right now without incredible guests like you that just come on and share so much. And I'm just very thankful for that. And I'm also just, like I said, I'm just super excited to see this new venture. So very excited for you.
Thanks, Ken.
Um,
Appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you. This has been absolutely incredible. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Sarah and John and Carolyn and everyone else who joined and offered so many fantastic questions. Looking forward to next week. So make sure that you join us. So super excited about that. All right. Until then, take care. Be safe, everyone. Catch you in the next one. Bye bye. If you're interested in hearing from other seven-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at onlylandfans.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.